Good morning, everybody. It's Nick here, as I am sure you can see. I just want to talk about death today. I know that can be a really difficult subject for many people. I know that it's somewhat of a taboo word in our society. It's a place where a lot of people don't want to spend too much time because it is seen and felt as sad and depressing and scary and something that we want to keep over there. But the reality is it's not going to stay over there. It is going to come into all of our lives in one form or another. And the narrative that currently surrounds death isn't always terribly helpful. And because we, in my humble opinion, because we don't talk about death more, we end up creating our own narrative, our own perspective, based on the world that we live in and the majority of views around how it's seen. Now, very often that is very sad and tragic and unfair and inhumane deaths that we see in the news, by so many of the terrible tragedies that happen around us all the time. Very often we get to see it in the stark medicalised light of the hospital with the tubes, or the drama programmes we see and how death is portrayed in there, and all of the angst and trauma that goes with that. And therefore the narrative and the opportunity for healthier perspectives and healthier views becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And I guess what I want to do is try and offer some different perspectives and different views. So I'm a soul midwife, nearly 2 years now. So a soul midwife provides end of life, not start of life, end of life care. But in a lot of ways, it's similar to a midwife. When we're giving birth, we have a birth plan and we have a support network around us, and we think about the very huge, enormous change that's coming our way, the adjustment, the transition in our life. And in a lot of ways, there are a lot of parallels actually with death, in terms of maybe we should have a death plan, maybe we should think about having a relationship with death. Maybe we need to think about what it is we want to do or say or be before that point comes, because it will come. And my observations and my own experiences with death is that it's in a lot of ways, when it comes, it's far more peaceful than we are led to be believed. We are led to believe based on the current narrative around us. But equally, it is desperately hard for many, many reasons. Fear, the enormous fear of the unknown, the excruciating, acute pain for the person who is leaving and has to leave their loved ones, the person who's dying. On the on the other side of that, the excruciating and acute pain of the people left behind, who are never going to get to hold the hand of that person, speak to, be with. Life will never be the same. And all of that is absolutely true. And this is in no way minimises any of that. I think what I'd like to do is offer a different perspective. There were two people who I stumbled across, or did I stumble across? Was I meant to come across them? That is another point. I'm not sure there are any coincidences in life. I'm really not. But I do a lot of reading and writing around the subject of death, because for me, I think it's far healthier for me to be able to have a relationship with death and to be able to embrace it, because death came into my life very, very, very unannounced, very unwelcome, very misunderstood, and it was hugely traumatic. And I think I decided that rather than allowing it to be a scary beast in the dark of the night, hidden in the corner of the wardrobe, I would dust it down and just see how scary and what a beast it really was. And that's what led me to actually become a soul midwife. but I digress. So the first person that I came across is a palliative care doctor and advocate of a much more holistic approach to dying, so that it is not a purely medical event, it is a human event. And he was talking, and he actually does a lot of coaching and support with his patients, and he actually set some homework for one of his patients who had a terminal illness, and that homework was, can you make friends with death? And this lady came back and she said to him, I can't make friends with death because I love life so much. I love waking up and seeing what the day has to bring for me and embracing it all and touching and feeling and sensing and colour, the colour of life. I remember these words she was saying, you know, my life, and this one was incredibly colourful. She was so creative and beautiful, and she just loved that colour and liberation in her life. And so he says, well, okay, you don't have to make friends with death, I get that, but can you at least think about having a relationship with death? Can you at least think about starting to get to know death? Because a lot of the evidence tells us that maybe it's not so awful, and maybe it is something different to what we are fearful of. And here's the thing, we don't know. We don't know what happens after death. We don't know if it is a nothingness. We don't know if we're going home. We don't know if we get to live again. We just don't know. And it is this fear of the unknown, of leaving what we do know to go to something that we don't know, that is just so primal, so excruciating. But actually, a lot of the evidence points to the fact that maybe, just maybe, it's not so bad on the other side. But in the absence of not knowing either way, maybe we should just take the optimistic view. And these were some of the words he was offering to his patient, who died but a few short weeks later. And then, after watching and reading some really interesting thoughts from this palliative care doctor who is based out in San Francisco, I then stumbled across another gentleman who had not one but several near-death experiences. So he died several times and come back, and he was using that experience to actually try and help people. So he works in a hospice, he spends a lot of time with people transitioning to wherever it is we go, and his experience was really interesting. So he said that when he had his near-death experience, he can really clearly remember going down a tunnel to this beautiful bright light at the end, this really, 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 really beautiful light that he was just so attracted to. And when he got to it, he said his whole life was in front of him, and it was like this panoramic view of his whole life that was just, time was a different concept in this world he was in. And that as he was going around this panoramic view, he could see every single person he'd come into touch with throughout the whole of his life. And more interestingly, he could feel how he'd made them feel when he'd interacted with them in life. And that really stuck in my mind. And therefore now he is so conscious about thinking, how do I make people feel when I interact with them? That's what that experience did for him. How do I make people feel when I interact with them? How do I leave them feeling? And that drives him every single day to be the very best person that he can, to be the kindest person that he can, the most understanding person that he can. And whether we want to believe those words, whether they resonate with us or not, in his mind, he just doesn't die. We don't die. We go on to something else. The soul is eternal. Now, I just think that we don't know. I don't know. I can't say either way what is or isn't. It's a very intimate, very personal conversation we need to have with ourselves, perhaps with our loved ones. And we may all arrive at a completely different conclusion, which is absolutely fine. But I do think it would be enormously helpful for us to be able to consider wider perspectives and different narratives around death in order to help us to be able to live with it better, because we have to, because some of our loved ones will die. We will die. This is not something we can work around or avoid. So therefore, I think it's worth trying to have a better relationship with death, a better understanding of it, a less fearful understanding, a less fearful relationship. Now, that doesn't mean it can be less sad or less traumatic or less changing, but although, sorry, there is a slight paradox in there, because I think if we can have a less fearful relationship with death, I do think that does go hand in hand with reducing some of the trauma, which I do genuinely see as very different to our sadness and our grief and our loss. I think we can be very grief-stricken and very lost and very sad in a way that is an expression that shows the love we have for the person we've lost. But I also think, based on my own experience, you can layer trauma on top of that by the way you lose that person and by the way the situation is, how you're supported and how it happens. And that is where I do think we can make a difference. I think we can make a difference in helping people have more peaceful, more accepting deaths. And I think we can make a difference in our perspective and helping people have a less fearful relationship with it. This is difficult, isn't it? It's difficult. You can see that I'm struggling here. I'm struggling to find the right words. I am struggling to find the right words to get the essence over of what I'm saying. So I do genuinely hope that I've managed to do that, which is to say it is a part of our life, whether we like it or not. And therefore, what can we do to make it a less fearful, less traumatic, and more human event in our life that we are able to find some kind of a relationship with that is healthier than where we are right now with it. I hope that's helped us consider some different perspectives and maybe a different narrative. Apologies for the dogs barking in the background. Such is life. Lots of love. Thanks for listening.